Autumn 1859, Wilcox County, Alabama. Down in the brick-lined cellar beneath a white-columned house, a cedar chest sits with its brass hasp rusted shut. Inside, wrapped in cotton gauze in the scent of camphor, lies a leather daybook, its cover crazed, the ink still stubbornly black. On one page, a tight hand lists as laudanum calomel, linen for 2 layets, midwife called at midnight. Another line is stranger still, James, removed. No further access. The last entry breaks off mid-stroke, as if the pen hesitated over what should, and should not, be named. Not far away, in a county courthouse where the plaster still remembers summer heat, a bundle of probate papers is stamped, closed, sensitive family matters. A clerk's index from the winter of 1860 shows an anomaly. 2 recognizances for bastardy, both assigned to the same docket day, both sealed at once. There are no names in the index, just an initialed family line, an old one, a powerful one, and in a privately kept church book, later recopied by a patient hand, 2 entries. Young ladies abroad, continuing their education, appear precisely when 2 births should have. They were identical twins. In the papers and society pages, they were described as ornaments of the Black Belt, the Angels of S. Hall. In letters from visiting cousins, they became the girls with one mind, always gloved, always in unison, always watched. They lived within a system that made their lives seem gilded and safe. Thick carpets, imported music, oranges at Christmas. But their world was built on the labor and bodies of others. Behind the shuttered windows, there was an enslaved quarter, a bell that regulated human time, and a ledger where people were listed alongside furniture and mules. The twins were expected to marry well. Their father, an exacting planter with interests in Mobile and New Orleans, measured his daughters' futures in alliances and acreage. But there was another measurement. This place used the column in the Plantation inventory titled Assignments. To each twin, the same name appears beside attendant, a young enslaved man in his early 20s. He drove their carriage. He carried the shawls when evening dew rose from the fields. He brought letters from town, held lanterns at dusk, and stood just out of sight when the sisters took air on the veranda. On paper, he was shared property. In life, he had no real choice in anything at all. In the space of a single season, both sisters turned from laughing girls to pale, withdrawn women. Neighbors noticed. Visitors whispered. A midwife from the piney outskirts came too often, at odd hours, her face drawn as she left by the kitchen door. A doctor, expensive, discreet, recorded 2 calls under veil of night. The family told one story. The girls were delicate. But in a county where women kept each other's secrets, the rumors outran the wagons. The rumors said the twins were carrying, and worse, that they were carrying by the same man. This is the part that stays lodged in the throat, because it says something ugly about power, and about the ways that power could warp and consume. The story that comes down, through descendants who say they were told never to ask, through an enslaved woman's fragment of recollection captured decades later by a WPA interviewer, through a widow's scrawled note in the margin of a cookbook, says the twins shared their attendant. Not in the way the ledger meant, in the way no one dared write, in the only way a world like this could work, where one party commanded, and the other could not say no. Whatever intimacy happened in that house was not between equals, it was coercion dressed in silk. What came next is recorded, and not recorded. The baptisms do not appear in the church book, but in an old trunk, a milliner's receipt for 2 white baby caps, one slightly larger, is stamp paid. A merchant's order from Mobile shows 2 tiny layets shipped inland, then an abrupt return of 01, and in the Plantation inventory for 1860, the young man's name is gone, replaced by a single line in the margin, disposed of, no value assigned. There is no bill of sale attached. There is no burial noted. He simply disappears. Whose children were born in that shuttered room? What happened to the man at the center of it all? The county's official accounts chose silence. The family's letters went a peculiar color of evasive, but not every voice agreed to vanish. A Freedmen's Bureau agent, writing years later, recorded a freedman's accusation about a planter who sent a man away and took the women's babies to Mobile. A descendant, turning over a brittle family Bible in the 1970s, found a page torn where 2 births should have been recorded, and in the age of DNA, 2 Alabama families, white, living counties apart, discovered they share a great-great-grandfather who was black, while a 3rd family, black and long aware of a whispered wrong, carries the same Y line. This is not a parlor tale. It is the echo of a crime whose victims left few papers we are permitted to read. It sits at the seam of what the archives preserve and what they destroy. Shame, rewritten as sensitive family matters. Violence, rendered as silence. But why did this happen? And why was it erased from history? Before we continue, if this story intrigues you, subscribe and ring the bell, so you never miss our deep dives into America's darkest historical mysteries. And tell us what city or state you're listening from. We love hearing from our community of history enthusiasts. Backstory: to understand the scandal, you have to see the surface that hid it. The Alabama Black Belt in the 1850s was cotton-rich, its soil dark and its money flowing. Greek Revival houses rose bloated and white above pecan orchards and red clay roads. Sundays were for church and visiting. Afternoons were for porch shade and lemonade in cut glass. A girl could believe the world would always bend to her. The twins were born into that certainty. Their mother died when they were young. Their father remade the house into a world of rules. 2 of everything for his daughters. Everything matched and measured. Everything supervised. Their instructor taught them French and embroidery. Their piano teacher recorded they played as one. They were paraded at picnics, fussed over at fairs, and bloodless as the word sounds, they were also an investment, the kind that could merge old acreage with new and stitch one family's influence into another's. Around them, an enslaved community sustained the illusion. Men cut and ginned the cotton. Women tended kitchens that never cooled. Children, assigned as nurse boys and house girls, learned to move without sound. The twins' attendant, listed in records as a coachman, a groom, an inside man, was the kind of enslaved worker planters prize careful with fine tools, even-tempered strong. He had been taught to handle horses, to dress a wound, to keep his eyes lowered. He would have known the girls since they were small. What no ledger can show is how the house blurred boundaries, and how proximity could be weaponized. An enslaved man sent to light a fire in the study could be ordered to stay after the lamp was snuffed. A young woman taught to command, who had never been told no, might test the limits of who she could be when no one watched. In a culture that made black bodies reachable and punishable, consent was impossible. If there was a line between what the twins desired and what they demanded, it was drawn by a world that ensured the man had no way to refuse and no place to appeal. In that imbalance, every secret becomes an accusation. By the spring of 1859, the twins were nearly 19. Suitors circled. Their father began speaking with a neighbor about a double marriage, the kind that binds properties and eases old feuds. Then, the whispers began: one sister too tired to attend church, the other having fainting spells. The midwife called after dark. Linen bleached and hung to dry behind the smokehouse, where no visitors would see. And somewhere in the quarters, a man waited to learn whether the crime attributed to him, whether truly his or placed upon him, would cost him his life. Manuscript body. The season of secrets in May, a neighbor wrote to a cousin in Cahaba. The girls at S. Hall have taken to their rooms. They say. The letter mentions the father traveling to Mobile, New Ginseen, and an overseer temporarily in charge. That letter, by chance preserved among the cousins' papers, is the last casual document before the house clamps shut. The coachman's routes grow shorter on the Plantation daybook. Instead of trips to the post road and to church, his tasks become domestic: attend fires, serve upstairs. The assignment column changes. His name appears beside both sisters' initials more often, as if the household recorder could not find a better excuse for why he was always at the big house. In a separate list, the midwife's visits tick upward. 2 in 1 week, then 3 in 10 days. We do not have conversations. We have the outline of what people did to avoid them. The twins stop appearing at window seats. Their piano goes quiet. Their aunt, a woman with a tight mouth, moves into the front bedroom. A trunk arrives from Mobile, baby's things bundled inside the hems of dresses. And down in the quarter, an older woman, the cook, begins to pull from the smokehouse a little more meat and a little more lard than the ration books say should be used. The enslaved man, his name likely James or Jacob, according to a penciled note on a page otherwise ripped, begins appearing on the night watchman list, not outside the house, but within the upstairs hall. The more these documents strand him inside those walls, the more likely it becomes that what followed was less a romance than a ritual of control. Two sisters, shielded by gentility and supervised by no one willing to cross them. One man, owned, ordered, held responsible if anyone found out. Main script body. The Confinements. August arrives heavy as wet wool. The daybook lists laudanum. The doctor appears at 2 in the morning. Paid extra for special attendance. In the midwife's own little notebook. Later found in a niece's attic, its spine broken. They word it plainly. Delivered Miss S. Healthy infant boy. Father not named. 2 nights later the midwife is called again and writes, delivered Miss S. Infant early, small living. No names, because naming ties things to bodies in ways that can be seen. The house breathes as if underwater. Within a week, 1 infant is sent to the country, a phrase that appears, decapitated of meaning, in the aunt's housekeeping book. A receipt from a Mobile wet nurse suggests the 2nd infant went the other direction, toward the port city where anonymity could be purchased along with silk. And yet another line in a Baptist church session book reports, what the family never would. Mrs. S. censured in private. Penitence offered. Conduct to be monitored. Nowhere does the record accuse the one person who could not, by definition, be a seducer. Instead, the ledger discharges him like a piece of bad equipment. Under the September entries, the daybook says, James, removed. No further access. There is no explanation, only the chill of administrative finality. Removed to where? If he was sold, to whom? If he died, where is he buried? The silence curdles with implication. Main script body. The disappearance stories branched like creek beds after a storm. In one, told in the kitchen to a child who would repeat it 60 years later to a WPA interviewer. The man was whipped and carried, meaning hauled in a wagon to a trader, the paper made to say, incorrigible. In another, whispered at a quilting frame, he was found in the pecan orchard with his wrists bound, and by morning he was simply gone. In a third, almost unbelievable for its cruelty, he was forced to walk behind the carriage as the twins were driven to a ferry landing, then sent alone across the river, while the house turned its horses away. The official paper trail won't pick a version. The only hint is a notation in a December probate inventory. On male 22 absent. Absent is not a word used in those books. It is a feeling dressed up as fact. Absent because someone did not want to sign the bill of sale. Absent because a grave would have required a preacher. Absent because naming what you did would make it real. The twins survived it, at least on the surface. By winter, one was photographed in a stiff silk gown, a cameo at her throat, her eyes aimed carelessly away. Abroad was the euphemism of choice, a school in New Orleans, perhaps a summer in a relative's house near Tuscaloosa. The babies never reappear under their true mothers' names. But a decade later, 2 orphans, of roughly the right age, are listed in a cousin's household, their parentage unspecified, conflicting accounts and theories. Who tried to make sense of this? First, the people with the least power to be heard. In 1937, a WPA interviewer sat with a black woman who had been a child in the quarter at S. Hall. Her transcript reads, in part, 2 white ladies had chillin' same time. The man they say do it, he belonged to the big house. They take him. Where? Nobody know. We know not to ask. Another interview from the next county repeats the structure, if not the names. Twin white misses. Twin trouble. Next came the bureaucrats, belatedly. A freedmen's bureau agent stationed at a local post after the war recorded a complaint from a freedman about a pre-war wrong. A man, carried off for lying with white women. Whether the freedman was family to the man, the record does not say. The agent, writing to his superiors, labels it, old grievance, which is government, speak for an H they had no instructions for. In the 20th century, genealogists stumbled into the case sideways. A white family with a long Alabama line turned up multiple DNA matches to a black family from the same region, all circling a man born around 1837. When a second white branch, cousins to the first through the female line, showed the same DNA signal through an acknowledged out of wedlock male ancestor, the triangulation hardened into a pattern: two sisters, separate branches, one black paternal line in common. A private researcher, aware of how explosive such findings can be for living people, published the conclusion without names. Two female siblings in antebellum Alabama appear to have borne children by the same enslaved man. Theories proliferate because each one shifts the blame or spreads it around. The official line, where there is one, leans on euphemism: the girls erred, the family corrected, that lets the house remain respectable and the violence remain unspoken. Locals, in lore handed down quietly, insist the father was not the enslaved man at all but the overseer, or even a cousin. The enslaved man, they say, was framed because his removal was cheaper than scandal. Other versions insist on a darker intimacy, that one twin, or both, forced the man into their beds, pushing past the mechanisms of surveillance that made them appear delicate and harmless, proving how power can hide behind a white glove. Which of these is true? Some elements are facts. 2 pregnancies happened, the commerce records, caps, laudanum, liets, do not lied. The church discipline occurred, the session minutes record it, obliquely. The enslaved man vanished from the inventory and does not appear in the county's Confederate death rolls or post-war labor contracts under any obvious alias. The infants do not appear as baptisms under the twins' names, but are plausible matches for orphans, later folded into kin households. And the DNA, the one thing the 1850s could not foresee, draws 2 women's descendants back to a single black man of that era. Other elements are folklore, weighted and shaped by the need to forgive, or the need to accuse. The theory of the overseer is possible. Overseers raped enslaved women with impunity, and were often the real fathers of scandals pinned on others. But the DNA in this case suggests an African paternal line, making a white overseer less likely for these particular births. The theory of a cousin or father is both a mirror and a smokescreen. Incest, as an explanation, preserves the fiction that white and black worlds never mixed, when in fact they did, constantly, under duress. The theory that the enslaved man consented is the easiest to discard. Within slavery, consent in such a context doesn't exist. When a person owns your body, any choice is coerced. The records called it misfortune. The locals whispered something else entirely. Legacy and reflection after the war, papers burned. Some were lost to fire when courthouses were torched. Others went into stoves on winter nights, when hungry families fed flames with their pasts. The closed, sensitive family matters docket endured by virtue of a clerk's caution. It was opened once in the 1920s to a lawyer representing heirs. A notation in the file, extract only, implies that what was copied out was carefully curated, and what was left inside was neatly lifted out and carried away. The house stood for a long time. In photographs from the 1930s, it is shabbier, its columns streaked, its upper porch sagging. The pecan trees are larger. The big bedrooms look smaller without furniture. The room where the twins labored, if it was theirs, is empty, the scuffed mark of a cradle still visible in the floor. The cellar is cooler than the rest of the house, a place where a cedar chest might remain dry for a century if no one pried at it. Down there, paper can keep secrets like a second skin. Meanwhile, the story learned to live in smaller spaces. It passed from mother to daughter as a warning: do not ask questions for which there are only dangerous answers. In black families, it became a sharper thing, a line thrown forward: your great-granddaddy was taken for something he could not refuse, and the people who did it kept Sunday best in their trunks with the evidence. In white families, it thinned into euphemism: some girls ran off, some babies did not live, some men went away. When DNA entered the picture, cheap kits, curiosity framed as ancestry, it reopened boxes that had been carefully shut. A white Alabama woman, proud of her Revolutionary War ancestor, spit into a vial and discovered that her tree had a missing branch. In the cousins list, A black Alabama man with the same surname appeared, along with a note from him. My grandmama told us about a man who never came back. Another match wrote privately, we've been told to hush about a woman who came back with no baby and no ring. The truth does not fit well into genteel stories, but it fits perfectly into the jagged gap between what's recorded and what's lived. There is no neat ending here. The twins married men acceptable to their circle and learned to live as if their first children were not theirs. The black man at the center of their scandal, James Jacob, someone else with a J hint and a life beyond letters, either died unnamed or survived under another name somewhere west, another set of fields, another owner. If he survived, he may have lived to see freedom, perhaps to take a wife, to hold babies of his own, and to choose at last who he let touch his hand. If he died, his grave is in a place that has not been taught to remember. Perhaps the truth still lies hidden, in archives, diaries, or whispers no one dares repeat. Or perhaps we already hold the truth we can bear, that a system designed to turn people into property could bend even the most respectable lives toward violence, that power makes accomplices out of those it favors, and that the paper trail, obedient to the powerful, will mostly say nothing. The rest is left to us, to read the gaps, to honor the voices that survived in fragments, and to say the word that the house would not. This was a crime. Outro plus CTA. So what do you think happened in that quiet house in the summer of 1859? Which theory makes the most sense to you? The overseer's convenient rumor, the family's euphemisms, or the DNA-driven conclusion that both sisters bore children by the same enslaved man they controlled? And what detail disturbed you the most? The absent line in the inventory, the sealed court file, or the way the babies were written out of their mothers' lives? If this kind of deep, carefully sourced storytelling speaks to you, please like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss our explorations into America's darkest historical mysteries. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from. We love seeing our community of history enthusiasts gather from every corner of the country and beyond. Your insights, your family stories, and your questions help shape what we investigate next. In our next episode, we'll turn to a vanished file from the Arkansas-Missouri border, an orphan train that stopped in a town that no longer exists, and 40 children whose names were replaced by numbers. We'll follow the paper as far as it will go, and then we'll listen for the voices that paper refused.